It's 26 degrees here in Abuja, the Federal Capital Territory. Good morning and welcome to Sunrise Daily, your daily dose of sunshine. I'm Maupe Ogun-Yusuf.
And I'm Ayo Makin. It's 27 degrees here in Lagos, and it already has the potential of climbing as high as 29 degrees. Today is June 25, 2025. Welcome to the show.
Indeed, Ayo. Well, we do know that this is the political season and quite a number of things are happening. Yesterday, there was a meeting between INEC and the People's Democratic Party. The echelon of the People's Democratic Party were there to see the INEC chairman and straighten out a few lines, which we'll be speaking out about much later today in the program. But then, while we're just watching the news last night, something caught my attention, and it was this story that came out all the way from Adamawa, talking about a new reordering within their chieftaincy titles and, chieftaincy affairs in general. And it does appear that something has happened that now seems to have affected the title of the former Vice President of Nigeria, former VP Atiku Abubakar, who is also known traditionally or carries the title Wazirin Adamawa. It does appear that there is now a restructuring, and this is a story. I'm just going to read it very quickly. It says, it came like this: the Adamawa state government has formally revoked, that was the word used, revoked the prestigious title of Waziri Adamawa, previously held by former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, citing a new indigenship policy affecting the Emirate Council leadership. Well, I'm just going to quickly read the part which concerns this. It says, traditionally considered the second highest ranking figure in the Adamawa Emirate after the Lamido, the Waziri Adamawa title now falls under new eligibility criteria, which stipulate that only indigents from Yola South, Yola North, Jire, Mayo, Belwa, Song, and Zumo districts can hold Emirate Council positions or titles. Atiku, a native of Jada local government area, which is part of the Ganye chiefdom, is thus disqualified. Which raises questions. Yes, we do know that things have not been quite rosy between the governor and the Wazirin Adamawa, the former vice president, since that title is now in contention. But then there are questions as to when new stipulations are made, do they apply retroactively? These are the questions I'm sure that lawyers will be asking. Ayo, I don't know how you received this piece of news. Did it come as a surprise to you as well?
Well, surprise doesn't quite cut it, Maupe. The only question is, first of all, that's supposed to be the second highest title in the land, and that you strip it from someone who was the second citizen of Nigeria at this time. The question is, what were the reasons for giving it in the first place? Were there political reasons? Was the title meritorious at the time? Or was it to appease certain interests for certain political dynamics? Of course, as we all know, the state government says it is purely administrative, but hey, what do you expect political analysts to say? They have linked the move to tensions, as you have said, Maupe, between the governor and the former vice president. Of course, both were prominent figures, within the PDP during the 2023 elections. So the question continues to be asked, as you have asked it, whether or not this has one thing or the other to do with politics. And secondly, as you have said, the question may be asked by lawyers, but will the former vice president go to court over this matter? How does this affect him politically, socially, psychologically, whatever? Those are the questions to ask. And as you have said, Malcolm, the coming days is going to, reveal a lot. Because the circular further stated that stated that the new policy applies to all council members and traditional title holders within emirate systems across the state. And so several others whose origins lie outside the approved districts have been affected as well.
Well, you know, Ayo, we'll keep tabs on what the developments in Adamawa, especially as they affect national politics. But then there are those who argue, what's in a title? I mean, does it really? It doesn't remove the fact that he was a former vice president of Nigeria. I do not know how he's going to receive or how he has received this piece of news. And then just, you know, doing some checks behind the scenes yesterday, I was told that no, the Waziri in Adamawa wasn't removed. The title wasn't removed. I'm now wondering, okay, if it wasn't removed, what happened? Was it disqualified, or has there been a miscommunication? It's unclear, really. But we'll wait for a little more clarity. But in the meantime, tell us what you make of the news. This is just us bringing this to your attention. We'll take a break about now, and then we'll come back and discuss what it is. We're discussing international affairs today. I mean, there is so much happening globally between Iran, Israel, the United States. And for those who are watching world politics, they're wondering how it affects Africa. You know, how should Africa be relating with the world at this time? We also had the ECOWAS meeting, which happened here in Abuja over the weekend. A new chairman has been elected. In the president of Sierra Leone. What are the implications of this? This is what we'll be sinking our teeth to in just a moment. Please stay with us.
The last time the authority of the heads of state and government of ECOWAS met in this hall, the decision to approve the exit of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso was reached. Today, at the round table, the flags of the three countries are conspicuously missing. But what decision will ECOWAS be taking today? This is what we are expecting. Follow us. President Bola Tinubu leads other heads of state into the hall after a closed-door meeting that lasted for several hours. As they settle down, the president of the ECOWAS Commission gives the opening remarks.
Those who join President Yakubu Gowon, head of state Yakubu Gowon of Nigeria, to establish ECOWAS deserve our permanent commendation.
President Tinubu has been chairing the authority of the heads of state and government of the ECOWAS since 2023, and under him, the organization has made some giant strides, including the establishment of a standby force.
We must act decisively to operationalize the ECOWAS standby force on the fight against terrorism to serve as an instrument for peace and stability for our region.
After the speeches, the meeting goes into a closed-door session for a few minutes before members of the media are asked to return for a brief on the major outcomes.
It has been a profound honor and privilege to lead this esteemed body, and I remain deeply humbled by the trust and support you have extended to me throughout my tenure. As I now hand over the mantle of leadership to my great friend and dear brother, His Excellency, President Julius Maada Bio of Sierra Leone, the new chairman of ECOWAS Authority of States and Government, I do so with a deep sense of fulfillment and optimism for the future of West Africa.
The president then hands over to his successor. He vacates the chairmanship seats to take his new seat as a member. In his inaugural speech, President Julius Maada Bio announces key areas his leadership will focus on in the next 1 year.
As chair, I will prioritize 4 key areas. First, restoring constitutional order and deepening democracy. Second, revitalizing regional security cooperation. Third, unlocking economic integration. Fourth, building institutional credibility. ECOWAS must reform itself and become more transparent, efficient, and responsive to its people's needs.
With that, the event comes to a close as President Bola Tinubu and the heads of state make their way out of the hall. But the president of the ECOWAS Commission engages members of the media for more on the outcomes of their engagements.
With regard to our relations, ECOWAS's relations with the members, the 3 member states that have withdrawn and formed the Alliance of Sahelian States, the authority has decided on the appointment of a suitable candidate as the chief negotiator to lead the discussion with the 3 countries. ECOWAS may have been facing challenges just like any institution, but ECOWAS remains what it is.
And these words of assurance given by the ECOWAS Commission President as to the strength of ECOWAS in the face of its challenges is one thing that President Julius Bio has to run with as the new chairman of the Authority of Heads of State and Government of ECOWAS. From the banquet hall of the State House in Abuja, Emperor Simon, Channels Television News.
Well, we have with us in our studios today a very cerebral global affairs analyst. Professor Ademola Abbas joins us in our studios here in Abuja. Good morning, and it's good to see you.
Nice to meet you too, Margaret.
I dare say I can bet my last penny that you have been watching what's been happening internationally. I just want to ask you, are you a little disappointed? Because this happened in the middle of all of the crisis that was currently going on in the Middle East, and it didn't seem that there was one word from ECOWAS leaders as to how, you know, the region should be viewing the problems currently brewing in the Middle East.
Well, thank you very much. Well, I don't think it's so much of a disappointment, to be honest with you, because I don't think ECOWAS will have wanted what was going on then, still going on now in the Middle East, to overshadow whatever it was about to do in Abuja when they met and stuff like that. But having said that, what one would have expected, you know, even if for just, you know, courtesy reasons, because you had a major war, whether you like it or not, albeit just for 12 days, but people died, a lot of conflagration, a lot of tension in the Middle East. You will have expected, to some extent, ECOWAS to reflect on that, and maybe to just say 1 or 2 things about why and how ECOWAS should be able to trade. But again, it's a very sensitive issue, and that's why I'm saying that it's not so much of a disappointment from where I see. I think it might be a political strategy not to be seen, to be using the platform that was meant to pass a baton of leadership from one person to another within ECOWAS, and to highlight some of their own challenges and what they've been doing, and to allow that to be bogged down. Because in that kind of environment, you say one thing about Middle East will be subjected to different interpretations that might not go well.
Yeah, even if it was just a statement of concern. But some people will say that maybe that was reflected in the election of the current chairman. The current chairman, Julius Maada Bio of Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone is currently a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council, and they had quite a lot to contribute to the debate that happened with the UN Security Council over the weekend. So maybe because we had heard, I mean, there had been stories that another president, contrary to who was elected, beg your pardon, chairman, contrary to who was eventually elected or who eventually emerged, had been pinned down by the ECOWAS leaders.
Well, that might be true. But look, it's a lot of factors come to play how you choose leadership of sub-regional or continental organization, be it ECOWAS or ECAS or EC, whatever you are, or even at the African Union level. many things are considered. But why the choice of Sierra Leone immediately after Nigeria? That might have played, the fact that Sierra Leone is a permanent member of permanent non-security council member might have played a role in that. You know, again, how much leverage do you have as a member of non-permanent security council? It's all in the open. But the most important thing, at least, is the fact that the baton passed from Nigeria to Sierra Leone, in the sense that there has been a lot of coordination between the two countries at different levels. And Sierra Leone is in a home to some vital resources of ECOWAS itself, especially its standby force and the ability to be able to operationalize some of its own activities and the force itself. So the choice might be strategic at this particular point in time, that because you never can tell when ECOWAS will have to be able to call on the service of the standby force. So you want somebody who will be ready and who actually has some kind of control of the resources of that particular force within his own country.
You see any situation where they might need to call on the standby force?
Oh, yes, definitely. I mean, standby force, don't forget, is set up for the purpose of counter-terrorism activities. And we still have quite a bit of that in West Africa, in the Sahel region, even in Nigeria here. And I think one of the bane of regional organizations in Africa, when I use regional, I'm subsuming under that, the sub-regional ones too, like ECOWAS. Of course, then you have the continental one, like African Union itself, is the fact that we often say so much about what we want to do in terms of, oh, let's, engage counter-terrorism, let's go for peace and security and this and that. But we don't often put the resources that are needed there. And we have the same problem in the African Union, which I had the opportunity of drafting the first major treaty that will govern the African Union and what we call Regional Economic Communities in Africa State, which is RECs. That is the relationship between the African Union and organizations like ECOWAS in the field of peace and security. It was a huge opportunity. I had the opportunity to work on that in 2005, about 20 years ago now. And most of those things that I envisaged in that particular treaty came to play within a very short time, actually before the treaty itself was adopted by ECOWAS, by African Union, beg your pardon. But unfortunately, you often lack political will. So we spend so much time, pontificating and, trying to wipe up sentiment. But at the end of the day, we don't often, follow through. So I'm thrilled that eventually they're operationalizing standby force of ECOWAS. But the question is, how much are they going to make use of it? It's still out there.
One of the things that struck out for me in the summary done by our correspondent is the fact that ECOWAS doesn't seem to be giving up on the Sahelian states that have now left the Union, even though, yes, which is one of the areas where some people have, said that the chairmanship of President Bola Tinubu's tenure will be checkered in terms of how he handled the situation. They think that if it was done a little differently, perhaps we will not be in a state where they would leave. But this is the situation right now. In spite of all of the periods of grace extended by ECOWAS, the members still decided that they were going to leave. But it doesn't appear that ECOWAS is giving up on them just yet. They've appointed a negotiator. And I'm wondering, why is it so important for us to have those members within the bloc? If they've decided to go, just leave them be. When eventually the moment impresses upon them that it doesn't make any sense, perhaps they'll find their way back.
Margaret, that's a very brilliant question. Let me start by saying that I don't quite agree with people, as you said earlier on, who think that, they could hold the way then the chairman, Ashwaju, handled the affair when there were military coups in those countries. That if he had handled them differently, maybe the outcome would have been different. Let me unbundle it. Do I actually agree entirely with the way the ECOWAS chairman, then that's Ashwaju, handled by drawing that red line and trying to authorize a military intervention? I do not. I do not, because it's very dangerous for you internationally to draw a red line and not be able to follow through. We saw when Obama did that in Syria. When he drew the red line about the use of a chemical weapon, and it was actually used, he couldn't move at the end of the day. So it was very dangerous to draw a red line without moving through. So the president shouldn't have drawn a red line in a very sort of too quickly, a red line. I
think that was a criticism, that it was hasty.
Precisely. I understand that. So that's how I'm unbundling it. So he quickly drew a red line. They couldn't follow through. But then we didn't say that because of that was why those countries left. The answer is no. Look, the exit of some Sahelian states from ECOWAS was a disaster waiting to happen. ECOWAS had been dogged in its entirety of its history by Anglophone and Francophone rivalry within the body itself, right from its formation. And it was deliberate. Don't forget, ECOWAS was formed by the Nigerian head of state then, you go on, calling on his counterpart, Nassimbe Eyadema in Togo. It was deliberate. So an Anglophone and a Francophone president or head of state, two of them traversed all the 16 West African states to be able to make them sign up to the famous Lagos Treaty, 28th of May, 1975. So it was deliberate to bring both ECOWAS, the Francophonie and the Anglophonie together. But pretty much after ECOWAS was formed, it was quickly discovered that things were not going to go as they actually anticipated it or expected it to be. So what I'm trying to say is that those countries went, number one, could not be, could not simply be penciled down to, oh, because of the way it was handled, albeit it could have been handled differently. But number two is that it mirrors a much bigger problem, and that is coming back to your last issue about do we really need to have these countries back? No. It goes to what I call the original sin in Africa about forming regional organizations. I'll explain it very briefly. When the European Union was going to start in 1957, a few countries came together, first of all established values, democratic values, human rights, this and that, and only among themselves they subscribed to that. Then once they become solid, they then began to extend the invitation to other European states. And they told them, if you wanted to be our member state, you must subscribe to these values that we already established. By subscribing to the values, you will get A, B, C, D carrots. But if you violate any of them, the sticks will be out for you. That is why till today, Turkey, one of the most economically prosperous countries in Europe, is not a member of EU. Because EU says, you haven't complied with our human rights and this and that, so we cannot allow you in. Why is Turkey trying so hard to be in the EU? Because it knows that if it is in the EU, there will be subsidy for its farmers. Turkish students will go and study in Western Europe, wherever, and pay the same fee a Brit is paying in the UK as a home student. All those things are carrots, basically. You don't have that in Africa. I do understand when the Organization of African Union was formed in the early 60s, we needed the numbers. Because most African countries were under one form of imperial colony or the other. So we needed everybody that was free then to join. But then, year 2000, when African Union was going to be formed, I particularly thought that the leadership of the OAU then, that had become completely dysfunctional, would take the opportunity to follow that particular path and take very democratic states to start a new organization. But we didn't do that. We just brought everybody inside again. The same thing with ECOWAS. What values? Let me ask you a question, Mark. What are Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, what are they missing by not being in ECOWAS? They're missing practically nothing. They don't have to contribute any penny to it anymore. They are no longer there. And that is why ECOWAS has to be begging people to come back to join it. You don't suspend somebody, penalize them, and then begin to beg them back. It means you have there's something missing in your system at the end of the day. That is the crux of the issue.
I do know that my colleague Ayo has questions for you. Ayo.
Well, thank you, Malkwe. I do not want to believe that, Prof, I don't want to believe that you've answered my question already, because I was going to ask, what the real challenge of this regional integration is. Now, it would seem then that from some of the things that you have said, the efforts have been made by various bodies to find out exactly what the real problem is, and probably even marshal some kind of regional integration. For instance, we've been talking about the AFCFTA now for eons, and it would seem like we're just pussyfooting around it. Then Nigerians can go to different parts of Africa, at least different parts of the West African sub-region, with very, very minimal, if any, inhibition at all. So in that light, if the people are not having a problem among themselves, what then would you call the real challenge to this regional integration in Africa? We're supposed to be an economic community. Are we an economic community? We seem to be more political than economic. So what, in your opinion, are the real challenge to regional integration in Africa, not only at the sub-regional level, but even at the continental level?
Well, thank you very much, Ayo. I think my earlier response to Mark's question sort of preempted part of your questions, and I think I've answered it partly with that. But there are other things that I didn't touch on. You just mentioned the fact that we seem more of a political community than an economic community. But are we really a political community at the end of the day? But that's $1 billion question. Let's put that on aside. But look, as I said earlier on, if you want to integrate, if you want to come together, there must be a genuine and, well thought out reason for wanting to come together. Look, I had the opportunity of working with the African Union, stationed in Addis Ababa, and as I said, I was the African Union, probably the first African Union expert on regional mechanisms. My job actually was to help African Union sort of establish its regional mechanism, which meant at that point in time, I had to go to almost there were 8 major RECs in Africa. I had to visit every single SADC in South Africa, Southern Africa, beg your pardon, EAC in East Africa, ECOWAS, and so on and so forth. I had to visit many of them, including IGAD in Djibouti and stuff like that. I had to visit many of them, trying to bring a cohesive relationship between those sub-regional organizations and the African Union, because they've been operating in silos at that point in time. And as I said earlier on, that was after I drafted the treaty that would bring both together. But the point is, one of the greatest challenges is there is a total lack of understanding of the reason for integration among African heads of state. More often than not, they see these organizations as a as a club, and that reflects in the language also. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we don't have our cultural ways of doing things in Africa. But when you come together as head of state who want to do serious business, and all you are hearing is backslapping, my brother from this, my brother from that, my sister from this, my sister from that, at the end of the day, not much is actually put on the table in terms of concrete things that should be done, that need to be done in the continent. And again, there's proliferation. You have a member of ECOWAS who is a member of CENSAD, which used to be hosted in Libya, and so on and so forth. So there is so many, proliferation going on and so many labidization going on. So at the end of the day, what you had is a spaghetti bowl of different countries, different ideas, and because you have your fingers in so many pies, you are never able to cook one solidly.
Prof, let me ask this question.
So as I said earlier on, part of it was the reason why they were formed.
Yeah, my apologies. So now that we have this on our hands, both at the regional level and at the continental level, it would seem like every state seems to be more interested on what's happening within them. You've given the example of the European Union, and a number of people would significantly agree with you. So do they have something like that? They are among themselves in the Asian communities and even in the Americas, so to speak. What kind of body? Maybe I should ask you first of all, do we need a regional body or a continental body to be together as a region or as a continent? Granted, the whole world wants to come to Africa now, seeing that Africa is the next civilization. And it would seem like Africa is the one behind in its own civilization. A good number of Africans still blame colonial masters for the woes that they are suffering. Nigeria, no less. So what should happen? Do you think we need a regional body or a continental body? If we do, what are the concrete, foundational, fundamental steps that must be taken if it must achieve any significant thing close to what's happening in the EU?
Well, thank you so much, Ayo. I think that was a question I've never had any journalist probably ask me on regional integration. And it's the most pivotal question, I must say. So the first question you asked in terms of whether we need regional or continental organizations, look, my answer straight away is yes. And that is because there's always power sometimes, there's always strength strength and power in collectivity. You know, because as the aphorism goes, no man is an island on his own. You want to be able to relate to others and to function with them so you can maximize your resources and whatever you have. I mean, even the law of comparative advantage will bear that out. So I don't think there is any doubt in the fact that, you know, when well intended, you do need a regional organization, be it at a continental level or at a sub-regional level. Now, your next question goes off from that, which is, what kind of organization do we need? Now, that is very, very important. Because before you ask that question, you did mention something very important, which is that every single state seems to be interested in their own affairs. Now, that goes to answer your question about what kind of organization. There's a difference between a normal international organization and a supranational organization. What you have in Africa today are nothing but international organizations, whether it's ECOWAS, it is African Union, it is NSAD, it is ECAS, it is IGAD. You know, in other words, an international organization is a donee of powers from its individual member states and can never use power beyond what is allowed by individual member states. So take ECOWAS as an example. ECOWAS come together, the former African countries came together, West African countries came together, form an organization called ECOWAS, gave part of their power to it to govern them in certain areas. But ECOWAS can never go beyond what individual members, you know, have agreed that it should do on their behalf. And that was why it was so easy for those three states to just exit. And normally, when you exit, you know, an organization, there should be a period under ECOWAS is 1 year, within which you must still comply with everything that you've agreed to. But that can only be possible when you have a supranational organization. Now, a supranational organization like the European Union is an organization that the member states have not only donated part of their sovereignty to it, but they've allowed it to go beyond what individual member states themselves could do. And that is why it is possible for EU today to sanction soccer bugs to the tunes of hundreds of billions of dollars and do so many things and punish a member state. You can do that because that is what they've agreed to. They've agreed that you are a supranational organization. And we don't have any supranational organization in Africa. Take African Union, for instance. Can African Union punish South Africa or Nigeria or Egypt or Libya? The answer is an absolute no. You cannot. That is even assuming it could punish any of the smaller countries. I'm talking about its biggest donors. You can never punish that. It's not possible because you are not a supranational organization. So for you to be able to have a meaningful international organization, you have to have some element of supranationality in which member states must be able and willing to say, look, the reason we come together is to make sure that we are collectively protected and want to do things better than we do individually. Well, so therefore, we want you as an organization to be able to lead us beyond how we can lead ourselves individually.
Let me quickly bring this in, and this is outside of Africa. Given what is currently happening in the Middle East, what do you think the response of Nigeria and that of ECOWAS should be to the conflict?
Well, look, I think from the way I see it, Nigeria as a country, let me start with Nigeria as a country, has got to tread very carefully, obviously, because there had been there was a rumor call from Tehran to a lot of states, a lot of nations, including Nigeria, I read. I cannot confirm the authenticity of that story, but I think it made round on the internet that to show up whether it was in support of Iran or not. You know, I don't think personally that Nigeria should jump and say, oh, I'm supporting you. Look, it's not an either-or business. That there was a major issue between Israel and Iran. It's been going on for decades anyway. Only this was the first time at this particular level, an outright war in which the US put itself in between that at the end of the day. So Nigeria will have to tread very carefully. And what you do is sympathize, you condemn violence, obviously, because whether you like it or not, Israel attacked Iran first. Nothing stops you from condemning that kind of aggression. It doesn't remove
and they've done that
already. They've done that already. So it doesn't remove anything from you. You have to do that. You have to be honest in doing that. Because the UN Charter, Article 2, Paragraph 4, prohibits the use of force by one state against another. Even though Israel was claiming self-defense, but self-defense is governed by Article 51 of the UN Charter. There are conditions that must be there before you can say, I am acting in self-defense. Even if you're acting preemptively, that is before you are attacked. If you want to attack as a preemptive self-defense, there are criteria in international law that must be carefully followed. These have not been done. So Nigeria must understand, and by extension, ECOWAS must understand that they must not sleepwalk into a trap in which many countries in 2003 supported the US when it was going against Saddam Hussein on what became a trumped-up charge that there was a smoking gun, or that there was a chemical weapon being developed by by Saddam Hussein. We did not find a single smoking gun in Iraq. That was after how many trillions of dollars have been blown and many countries have become polarized. So both Nigeria and ECOWAS have to tread very carefully.
Well, Prof, we certainly will bring you back again on this particular matter as we continue to watch development locally and internationally. Thank you so much for sharing your insight with us. Professor Ademola Abbas is a global affairs analyst. We'll take a break at this time, and we'll be looking at more local matters in just a moment. I did tell you about the PDP meeting with INEC. We'll be looking at that in just a moment. Please stay with us.
Integration. Fourth.
The acting national chairman of the People's Democratic Party and members of the PDP Governors Forum are attending this meeting with the leadership of the Independent National Electoral Commission at the INEC headquarters in Abuja. The meeting is to discuss issues surrounding the PDP National Secretary crisis and the recent reply of the electoral body to the PDP notice of her 100th National Executive Committee meeting, scheduled for June the 30th.
We had NEC, and there was a decision of NEC which mandated me to sign a letter to avoid controversy. And I received your reply on that letter, urging us to be guided by certain rules. So I think we are here to interact sincerely with you, off camera, so that it will guide us.
In his remarks, the INEC chairman cited inconsistencies in some recent correspondence from the PDP, making it impossible for it to play its role as the regulator of political parties.
In the last couple of months, we received letters from the party saying that one Mr. Ude Okoye was the secretary. Thereafter, the party changed its mind and said it was Senator Anyao. Thereafter, the party changed its mind to say that it's Mr. Shokwedo. And again, the party changed its mind to say it's Anyao. And the last letter from the party actually has no secretary at all. It was only signed by the chairman, which we responded to. So there are issues to discuss. And we look forward to this important clarification from the party as to who is the secretary.
The meeting then proceeds into a closed-door session, which lasted for about 1 hour. At the end of that meeting, the acting national chairman of the party briefs the media on the outcome of the closed-door session.
We will go back and meet our larger stakeholders and disseminate all the discussion that has taken place today, and we'll come up with a position immediately. Thank you.
Chairman, sir,
you will hear from us.
The PDP has been enmeshed in several crises, including those of the secretary position, which has seen the party battle legal battles, as Mr. Samuel Anyanwu and Ude Okoye lay claim to the office of the national secretary of the party. However, the party is expected to take a decision on the matter at the June 30th meeting of the National Executive Committee.
To the president.
see.
Well, Mr. Ologbondiyan joins us now. He's a former spokesperson of the People's Democratic Party, and he'll be shedding light on what actually transpired at that meeting yesterday. I don't know if you were part of it.
No, I wasn't. I wasn't. Malpe, I wasn't.
Were you aware that the meeting was happening?
No, I was fully aware.
Okay.
I was fully aware.
What was the meeting about? At whose behest was it summoned?
Honestly, this is not a laughing matter.
You are the one laughing.
Yes, watching eminent party members going before INEC.
The regulator.
The regulator to go and beg her, come and help us. It's distressing. Very, very distressing.
Was that what they went to do?
Because that's what they went to do, because the constitution of the party is clear. And like I've often said, when you make rules for yourself, you must be prepared to run by the rules that you have made for yourself. So it's very depressing that eminent members of the party will go before INEC and say, come and solve our problem for us. It's very disgusting.
What is disgusting about it? INEC is a regulator of political parties. In addition to being an electoral body, it also has oversight over the affairs of political parties, doesn't it?
It doesn't. It's not that of an oversight concerning the functioning of the internal affairs of any political party. It is not. Well, you check through electoral
Okay, well, yes, the party is supreme.
The party, even the Supreme Court judgment, which Anyanwu pursued, which Senator Samuel Anyanwu, with due respect, pursued to its end, refer the party back home and say, go and look among yourselves and your own rules and sort whatever problem, whatever challenge that you have. So now I'm going to INEC to go and do what? Now you are going to INEC. INEC has told you that it cannot choose your officials for you. Just like Debo Ologbondiyan said at the weekend, that look, this is an internal affair, our own internal affairs. Supreme Court has said that. So whatever decision we have reached as a party, let's stand by it. So INEC can never come and tell us that, for example, Madam Maope, you are the National Secretary of the People's Democratic Party. Sheung Okinbaloye, you are the National Chairman. INEC is not going to do that. It's your duty to tell INEC, this is the person that we have nominated, that we have elected, or that we have replaced with our officer as holding whatever position.
Do you think that they were testing the waters to see if because there's clearly controversy, you know, in terms of the correspondence. I think that the INEC chairman made reference to it. The correspondence that they have been receiving from the PDP, they said initially was signed by INEC, the chairman and the secretary. Later on, it was signed by the deputy secretary. Later on, it was signed by only the chair. You have the INEC chairman.
I heard
that. So, and it does appear that the PDP has been looking for ways, the leadership, to make sure that, you know, the deputy national secretary, whom they want to act in place of the substantive secretary, you know, is accepted by INEC. And it doesn't appear that that has gone down pretty well, has it?
Malcolm, let me tell you, it's all politics, and it's politics within the party. Let me explain to you, let me explain it to you and through to Nigerians. The National Working Committee sat down under its own purview and said the current, Senator Sam Anyanwu is no longer the National Secretary. And for the time being, pending when NEC will meet and decide on the report of the Southeast, let the deputy begin to act in that capacity, as provided for in section 36(2) of the party's constitution, where it says that the deputy can be directed to act. So working committee members in their majority opted for that, took that option. Now, the national chairman wrote a letter to INEC recommending Setonji Kusedo, the deputy national secretary, in acting capacity. Then, like the INEC chairman said, after they have accepted that, and in their meeting, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu told those leaders that when you brought that first name, we accepted it in our database, but we have not replaced it. Then you brought Anyanwu again. So when it came to the election of the issue of the Anambra election, since we have a conflict of nomination, we reverted back to Anyanwu because it is the name that's already in the database. But now, go and decide among yourselves whom you want to be your national secretary and bring the nomination. Pronto, you know what has happened? Senator Sam Anyanwu has gone to reawaken the court matter after Supreme Court has given decision. Has now gone to reawaken the Supreme Court in the FCT Federal High Court. And it has been now put in the court of Justice Joyce Abdul Malik after ECOWAS, who was in charge of it, had been suspended. So you just see this rigmarole and you wonder, what future? Well, anyway, for me, I am not shocked, I'm not surprised by everything that is happening, because I have said it in the last 1 year. I have said it to you, even on this platform. Until you replace Ambassador Elias Adamawa and bring an effective national chairman to run the affairs of the party, PDP is going nowhere. I have said it over and over and over. And it's manifesting.
Well, I know that Ayo has a question for you at the minimum. Ayo.
Well, thank you, Okwe. You know, Mr. Logag, one of the things a good number of people want to know is, look, the woes of the PDP didn't start in 2023. There are those who date it back as far as 2011, you know, and the question to ask then is, if the problem, the issues, I mean, you said something the other time, eminent members of the party, quite elderly, quite experienced politicians as well. If the issues are as far back as, what, 2015, and the issues, the dust hasn't quite settled, there are so many questions to ask. What are your own questions for your party?
There are so many questions to ask. What are your own questions for your party?
Well, number one, let me start by saying that this is Kola Ologbondiyan. But having established that, I didn't get that question. What are my own questions for the party? Or what's the question?
Because as some will say, and you have also alluded to it a number of times, a good number of times, the questions, the issues predate even 2015. There are those who cite it back as far as 2011 during the Jonathan administration. So I'm asking, don't you have questions that you want the elders of your party to answer?
I'm asking, don't you have questions that you want the elders of your party to answer?
No, I don't have any question that I want the elders of the party to answer. Rather than let us follow the rules of our party. What does the Constitution that guide our day-by-day activities say on every issue? And that's why I continue to respect Prince Uche Secondus, the total chairman. As the chairman of our National Working Committee, Secondus will often tell you, open the Constitution. What does the rule say? If we go by the rules, we are not going to have problems, except those problems have become man-made. But if you align yourself with provision of the Constitution, we are going to have a challenge. And that is what we operate now. But when you know what the rule says, you are abandoning your own Constitution and beginning to find solutions among friends and committee and committee of friends. You are not leading the party to anywhere, and that's the honest truth. And
is it the rules? My apologies.
In as much as the Magoon,
just a second, Mr.
He legitimately sits on the chair of the national chairman, abandoning his own office.
If you can hear me, just 1 second to quickly, puncture to one question. Is it the rules of the party that is responsible for the defections to the Action Congress in 2011? Is it the rules that is responsible for loss of public trust in the PDP?
You remember our last discussion here? I did tell you that, look, there's no need going into revisionism about the People's Democratic Party, and I stand by that. What are the challenges of today? And how do we get out of the challenges of today? I think that is the issue, Ayo. And I'm saying this with every sense of responsibility. Are we going to say that because somebody was National Secretary in 2011, if the current National Secretary, his own colleague said that we don't want to work with you again, so you step aside, let your deputy act. You even went to Wadata Plaza, your own staff over whom you manage, now said, okay, since you are here, we can leave the place for you and work that on you. I mean, what is there now? We were also in this end of the UC. We were told one day in the NEC meeting that we should take paper and resign. We didn't bring down the roof. So what is there? If they are desirous, if they are honest, and they want the party to run its course. Me, I'm talking like this because we're in the public space. Otherwise, I will just sum it up and tell you that, look, there's a design to incubate the People's Democratic Party, and I think I've even said this before, and make sure that it is not effective in the 2027 election. So but there are those who are also within that party who are saying, no, we will not allow you to do that. We must continue to make the party relevant and allow it to function as an opposition party. These are the contradictions.
Do you think that the coalition has been proposed, do you think it's a viable option for the PDP?
Oh, no, it's not PDP. The Governors Forum said they are not in coalition now. The Governors Forum has said, and the party, the leadership of the party, has not said they are in coalition.
But do you think it's an option?
But I am aware, and I say this clearly, I am aware that coalition consists of people from various ways of life, politicians, students, youths, people who are non-aligned, who have no political basis. That's what the coalition is driving at. I can say that from what I have.
Do you think it's a viable option? That's the question I'm asking.
No, you know, I cannot sit down here and dismiss my party. I have not left PDP. I'm still a member of PDP. Maybe when I leave the PDP, I can come back here and tell you if it's a viable option.
Are you going to leave, given all that is currently happening?
Well, let's see how far we can go with this.
All right.
That will decide.
We'll see how that eventually pans out. Time is always our friend. We have to thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Early this morning. Mr. Kola Ologbondiyan is a former spokesperson of the People's Democratic Party. Well, I did say that there's a lot to consider today, and you're free to tell us what you make of all of the issues that we have spoken about on the program this morning. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Maokwe Ogun Yusuf.
And I'm Ayo Makinde. Enjoy the rest of your day.